There is a tree that holds up the sky. Its roots reach down into wells of memory and fate. Its branches stretch above the clouds, and somewhere in its vast canopy an eagle sits watching over everything. The wind moves through its leaves like a whisper that has been traveling since the beginning of time. This is Yggdrasil, the world tree, and tonight every story we tell grows from its roots. The Norse people knew something that most civilizations have forgotten. They knew that the universe is not a machine, it is a living thing. It breathes, it grows, it has a heartbeat, and that heartbeat sounds like wind through ancient pines, like waves breaking against cold northern shores, like the crackle of a fire in a great wooden hall on a winter's night. Tonight, you are in that hall. Picture it, a long mead hall built of rough-hewn timber, the beams carved with images of gods and serpents and ships. The great fire in the center has burned down to embers now, just a deep amber glow that paints shadows on the walls. The benches are mostly empty. Snow falls silently outside, and through the heavy wooden doors you can hear the wind moving across the fjord below. You have found the warmest place, close to the dying fire, wrapped in furs, and someone is still here, an old storyteller, voice worn smooth by years of telling these same tales. They do not perform, they simply share, as if remembering something they saw with their own eyes a very long time ago. Let your body settle now. Let the warmth of the embers reach you. There is nothing you need to do tonight, nothing to solve, nothing to hold on to, just a voice, a fire, and stories that are more than 1,000 years old. The Norse world was born from a meeting of fire and ice in an emptiness so vast it had no edges. And it will end, the gods themselves knew this, in a final battle where even they would fall. But between that beginning and that ending there is everything: love and trickery, sacrifice and laughter, giants and wolves, and a bridge made of rainbow light. These are not fairy tales. They are the stories that entire civilizations used to explain why the world is the way it is, why winter comes, why wisdom costs something, why the people we love will not be here forever, and why that makes every moment with them sacred. The Vikings carved these stories into stone. They whispered them to their children. They carried them across frozen seas in longships with dragon prows, all the way from Scandinavia to Iceland, where a poet named Snorri Sturluson finally wrote them down in the 13th century. Preserving a world that was already fading. Without Snorri, we might have lost all of this. He was a complicated man, a politician, a chieftain, a scholar, who was eventually murdered by his enemies in his own home in Iceland in 1241. But before that end, he sat in his study and wrote down the stories his people had been telling for centuries, not as a believer exactly, but as someone who understood that these tales were too beautiful and too important to let die with the old religion. The Prose Edda, his masterwork, is one of the great literary treasures of the medieval world, and the Poetic Edda, an anonymous collection of older poems preserved in a manuscript found centuries later, gives us the actual voices of the Norse poets, stanzas that were composed in the age of long ships and mead halls, centuries before anyone thought to write them down. Tonight, we will hear some of those words, translated across 1,000 years, but still carrying something that cannot be translated, a feeling, a way of seeing the universe that makes even the darkness feel purposeful, and even the endings feel like beginnings. So let the fire settle, let your breathing slow, and let us go back, all the way back, to the very beginning. Before the earth existed, before the stars, before time itself had a name, there was only a gap, an emptiness between worlds, and from that emptiness everything was about to be born. In the beginning there was nothing. The Norse poets had a word for this nothing. They called it Ginnungagap, the yawning void. Not darkness exactly, because darkness implies something that could be light. This was before light, before darkness, before the concepts of either had anyone to think them. Ginnungagap was pure potential, a silence so deep that it contained everything that would ever exist, waiting to happen. But this void was not uniform. To the north of the emptiness lay Niflheim, a realm of mist and ice and cold so absolute that nothing could survive there. Frost formed in layers upon layers, building and building in the darkness. And to the south lay Muspelheim, a realm of fire so intense that the air itself burned. Sparks flew endlessly from its borders, and rivers of flame carved channels through rock that had never known coolness. For eons, if you could even call them eons since time had not yet started, these two realms simply existed, ice in the north, fire in the south, and the great emptiness between them. And then they met. The ice of Niflheim crept toward the center of the void. The heat of Muspelheim pushed outward. And where ice touched fire, where the coldest thing in existence met the hottest, something extraordinary happened. The ice began to melt. and from that melting, from that meeting of opposites, life emerged. Not a god, not a human, something older and stranger, a giant, the first being, named Ymir. Ymir was vast, unimaginably vast. He lay in the void and slept, and as he slept, he sweat, and from his sweat came other giants. The frost continued to melt, and from the ice emerged a great cow named Audhumla, whose milk sustained Ymir. And Audhumla herself licked the salty ice blocks around her, and as she licked, slowly, over 3 days, she uncovered something buried in the frost, a shape, a face, a being named Buri, the first of the gods. There is something beautiful about this image if you let it settle. The first god was not born in glory or thunder. He was uncovered patiently by an act as simple and gentle as an animal licking salt from ice. The divine was always there, hidden inside the frozen world, waiting to be revealed. Buri had a son named Bor, and Bor and his giantess wife had 3 sons, and the eldest was Odin. Odin, the All-Father, the one-eyed god of wisdom and war and poetry and death. He would become the most complex figure in all of Norse mythology, a god who valued knowledge above power, who was willing to suffer for understanding, who could see the future and knew it held his own destruction and chose to face it anyway. But that comes later. First, Odin and his brothers looked at the world they had inherited, a void occupied by a sleeping giant, and they decided it was not enough. They killed Ymir. This is not a gentle detail, and the Norse poets did not soften it. The 3 young gods slew the primordial giant, and from his body they built the world. His flesh became the earth, his blood became the seas and rivers, his bones became mountains, his skull, vast beyond comprehension, was lifted up to form the dome of the sky, held in place by 4 dwarves at the cardinal points. His brains became the clouds. There is a strange tenderness in this violence. The world you walk on, the sky you look up at, the ocean you hear in the distance, all of it was once alive. All of it was part of something that lived and breathed and dreamed. The Norse universe is quite literally the body of the first being who ever existed. Creation in the Norse telling is not something made from nothing. It is a transformation. Fire meets ice. Something melts. Something is born. Something dies. Something new is built from what remains. This is the pattern that will repeat throughout every story we tell tonight. Destruction and creation, woven together like the threads on the Norn's loom. The brothers were not finished. They took sparks from Muspelheim and scattered them across the inside of Ymir's skull, and those sparks became the stars. They set the sun and moon on their paths. They built a wall from Ymir's eyebrows to protect a green and sheltered place in the middle of everything, and they called it Midgard, the world of humans, our world, sheltered by the body of a giant, lit by stolen fire, circled by a serpent so large it could bite its own tail. Let that image settle as you rest. The earth beneath you is part of something ancient and alive. The sky above is a vast sheltering dome, and the stars are sparks from the original fire, scattered by gods who wanted the darkness to have a little light.
Now the world existed, but it was not alone. The Norse cosmos was not a single place. It was 9 worlds, each distinct, each alive, each connected to all the others by the roots and branches of a single immense tree. Yggdrasil, the world tree, the axis around which everything turns. Imagine it, and let the image build slowly in your mind as you rest. A tree so vast that its crown is lost in mist above the highest clouds, its trunk wider than any mountain, its bark rough and ancient, marked by ages beyond counting. 3 enormous roots plunge downward into 3 wells, each one a source of power and knowledge. At the base of one root lies the Erd well, where the Norns sit. We will meet them soon. At another root lies Mimir's well, the well of wisdom, where Odin paid the price of an eye for a single drink. And at the third root lies Hvalgermir, the roaring kettle, a spring from which all rivers flow, gnawed constantly by the dragon Nidhogg. The tree itself is alive with creatures. An eagle perches at the crown, surveying everything. A squirrel named Ratatoskr runs up and down the trunk, carrying insults between the eagle above and the dragon below, an eternal messenger of mischief. 4 great stags roam the branches, nibbling at the new growth. Yggdrasil is not a quiet place. It is an ecosystem, a world within itself, and from its branches hang the 9 realms like fruit on a cosmic vine. Asgard sits highest, the realm of the Aesir gods. This is where Odin's great hall Valhalla stands, where the Einherjar, the honored dead who fell in battle, feast and fight and prepare for the final war. Asgard is connected to Midgard by Bifrost, the rainbow bridge,
guarded day and night by Heimdall, whose hearing is so keen he can hear grass growing, and whose horn, Gjallarhorn, will one day sound the alarm that the end has come. Midgard, our world, sits in the middle, as the name suggests, sheltered by Ymir's eyebrow wall, circled by the vast ocean in which the Midgard serpent lies coiled. The humans who live here were created by the gods, but they are not powerless. They have free will, courage, and the capacity for both great kindness and great cruelty. Jotunheim lies beyond, the land of the giants. Not all giants are enemies of the gods. Some are ancient and wise, some are beautiful, some are terrible. Jotunheim is a place of wild, untamed forces, mountains that move, rivers that roar, storms that have personalities. Much of the tension in Norse mythology comes from the border between Asgard and Jotunheim, between order and chaos, between the shaped and the shapeless.
Varnheim is the realm of the Vanir gods, an older family of deities associated with fertility, the sea, and the natural world. The Vanir fought a war with the Aesir long ago, and the peace settlement involved an exchange of hostages. The Vanir are gentler than the Aesir, more connected to the earth and its rhythms. Alfheim belongs to the light elves, beings of beauty and radiance that the sources say little about, as if they exist just at the edge of perception. Nidavellir, or Svartalfheim, is the realm of the dwarves, master craftsmen who forged nearly every magical object in the mythology: Thor's hammer, Odin's spear, the ship that could fold up like cloth, the golden hair that grew like real hair. Muspelheim burns eternally in the south, the realm of fire, ruled by the giant Surt, who carries a flaming sword and one day set the world ablaze. And Niflheim lies frozen in the north, mist and ice and ancient cold. Within Niflheim, or perhaps below it, sits Hel, the realm of the dead, those who did not die in battle, but passed quietly from illness or old age. It is ruled by Hel herself, a goddess who is half living flesh and half corpse, neither cruel nor kind, simply the keeper of those whose time has ended. 9 worlds, each one a different note in a vast chord, and Yggdrasil holds them all. The tree trembles sometimes, the Eddas tell us. When great events shake the cosmos, Yggdrasil shudders, and every world feels it. The tree is not just a structure, it is a living being, and its health is the health of everything. The Norns water it daily from the well of Urd, trying to keep it strong. But Nidhogg gnaws at the roots, and the stags nibble the branches, and slowly, Slowly, the great tree weakens. This is one of the deepest truths of Norse mythology. Even the thing that holds everything together is not permanent. Even the world tree will one day fall. But tonight it stands, vast and sheltering, its branches creaking gently in winds that blow between worlds. Rests now beneath its canopy, and let us climb down to the well of Urd, where 3 women sit, weaving the fate of every living thing.
At the base of Yggdrasil, where the greatest root plunges into the earth, there is a well, the well of Urd, the well of fate. Its waters are so clear they seem to glow from within, and the mist that rises from its surface carries something more than moisture. It carries knowledge, memory, the weight of everything that has ever happened and everything that ever will. And beside this well, 3 women sit. They are called the Norns, Urd, whose name means what has happened, Verdandi, what is happening, and Skuld, what must be. Past, present, and future, 3 threads woven together into a single fabric. The Norns are older than the gods. This is important. Odin rules Asgard, Thor defends it, but neither of them is above fate. The Norns weave the destiny of every being, god, giant, human, elf, and even Odin cannot change what they have set in motion. He can see it coming, he can prepare for it, but he cannot undo the thread once it has been woven. Every day the Norns draw water from the well and pour it over the roots of Yggdrasil. They mix the water with white clay from the banks, and they pour this paste over the bark, healing the damage that Nidhogg inflicts from below. Without the Norns, the world tree would wither. Without the world tree, the 9 realms would collapse into the void. So these 3 women, quiet, unseen, never worshipped with temples or sacrifices, are perhaps the most important beings in the entire cosmos. They do not speak much in the stories. They simply work, carving runes into the wood of Yggdrasil, drawing water, pouring it, weaving at their loom. The Norse concept of fate is not like the Greek version. The Greeks imagined fate as a fixed line, a single thread for each life, measured and cut. The Norse imagined something more complex. They called it weird. And weird is not a line, it is a web. Everything you have done, every choice you have made, every person you have touched, and every moment you have lived through, all of this weaves together into a pattern, and that pattern is your weird. It is not predetermined in the simple sense. Your past shapes your present shapes your future. But there is always the possibility of the unexpected thread, the choice that changes the pattern. The Havamal,
Odin's own wisdom poem captures this understanding in a verse that has echoed through centuries. Cattle die, kinsmen die, you yourself will die, but there is one thing I know that never dies, the reputation of the dead. What you do matters. How you live matters. Not because some god is keeping score, but because your actions become part of the weave. They ripple outward. They affect every thread that touches yours, and long after your thread has ended, the pattern you helped create remains. This is why the Norse valued courage so highly, not because bravery ensures survival, it often ensures the opposite, but because a courageous act weaves a strong thread into the fabric of weird, a thread that holds the pattern together for everyone who comes after. The Norns know all of this. They see the entire tapestry at once, the parts already woven and the parts still to come. They do not judge, they do not intervene, they simply weave, and what they weave becomes real. There is something deeply restful about this image, if you let it settle. The idea that somewhere, beneath a tree older than time, 3 quiet figures are tending to the pattern of existence. That your life is not random and disconnected, it is woven into something larger. Every moment, even this one, lying in the dark, listening, breathing slowly, is a thread being added to the tapestry. The Norns are weaving right now. They weave through the night. They never stop. And whatever tomorrow brings, whatever the pattern holds, tonight the thread is gentle. Tonight the weave is soft, and you are held inside it as surely as the roots of Yggdrasil are held by the earth. Let that thought carry you as we leave the well and travel upward to meet the God who sat on the throne of the universe and looked out across everything, and still felt he did not know enough. Odin is the strangest god you will ever meet. He is the king of the Aesir, the ruler of Asgard, the father of gods and men. He sits upon Hlidskjalf, a throne from which he can see everything that happens in all 9 worlds. 2 ravens, Hugin and Munin, thought and memory, fly out each morning and return each evening to whisper everything they have seen into his ears. 2 wolves lie at his feet. He carries a spear called Gungnir that never misses its mark. And yet, with all of this, Odin's defining quality is not power, it is hunger. A hunger for knowledge so deep that nothing could satisfy it, not throne, not kingdom, not even the sight of all 9 worlds laid out before him. Odin wanted to understand, not just to see, but to know. Why does the world exist? What does the future hold? What is the meaning hidden beneath the surface of things? These questions drove him more fiercely than any battle, and he was willing to pay. The first price was an eye. Near the roots of Yggdrasil, far below Asgard, lies Mimir's well, the well of wisdom. Its waters hold knowledge of everything that has been and everything that will be. Mimir, an ancient being of vast intelligence, guards the well and does not give its waters freely. Odin came to the well alone. He stood at the edge and looked into the water, and in that water he could see a faint reflection of everything he wanted to know, but could not quite read it, and Mimir named the price. An eye. The gift of an eye dropped into the well forever in exchange for a single drink. Odin did not hesitate. He reached up and he plucked out his own eye and he dropped it into the well, and then he drank. What did he see? The Eddas do not tell us exactly, but after that moment Odin was changed. He saw the world differently, not just with his remaining eye, but with some deeper sight. He saw the shape of things, the connections between events, the way the past flows into the future. He saw Ragnarok coming, the twilight of the gods, and he knew he could not prevent it. He gained wisdom, and with it he gained sorrow. This is the bargain. This is always the bargain. But one sacrifice was not enough. The second price was 9 nights of agony. Odin hung himself from Yggdrasil, pierced by his own spear. No food, no water. For 9 days and 9 nights he dangled between life and death, staring into the void below, waiting for something to reveal itself. The Havamal preserves his own account of this ordeal, and the words are haunting. I know that I hung on that wind-battered tree 9 full nights, wounded by a spear, and given to Odin, myself to myself, on that tree whose roots no one knows from where it springs. Himself to himself. This is a god sacrificing himself to himself, an act of self-surrender so complete that it circles back on itself. He was the sacrifice and the one receiving the sacrifice. He gave everything he was to become something more. And at the bottom of those 9 nights, when his body was broken and his consciousness was dissolving, he looked down and saw the runes, the secret letters, the symbols of power that encode the fundamental forces of the universe. He reached down, screaming with effort, and he seized them. The runes were not just an alphabet. They were magic. They were the building blocks of reality. With them, Odin could heal wounds, calm storms, speak to the dead, bind enemies, and read the threads of fate. The runes were the deepest knowledge in the cosmos, and the price for them was everything Odin had. This is the Norse philosophy of wisdom distilled to its essence. Understanding is not free. It is not given to the comfortable or complacent. You must be willing to give something up, comfort, certainty, even a piece of yourself, to see the truth. And there is a gentler lesson hidden inside this fierce one, a lesson that might be especially welcome tonight as you rest. Odin's sacrifice on the tree was, in its way, an act of surrender. He stopped trying. He stopped doing. He hung in emptiness and let the void have him. And only then, in that total letting go, did the deepest knowledge reveal itself. Sometimes wisdom comes not from effort, but from rest, not from seeking, but from being still enough to see what is already there. The one-eyed god learned this on his tree. Perhaps you can learn a version of it tonight, in the quiet, in the dark, in the space between one breath and the next. If Odin is the thinker, Thor is the doer. Where Odin sits and broods and sacrifices, Thor strides forward with his hammer in hand, ready to face whatever the universe puts in front of him. He is the god of thunder, the protector of both Asgard and Midgard, the red-bearded, iron-gloved, deeply human god who is beloved precisely because he is not subtle. Thor does not scheme. He does not trade body parts for wisdom. He sees a problem, he picks up Mjolnir, his hammer, forged by dwarves capable of leveling mountains, and he solves it. There is a beautiful simplicity to Thor that has made him the most popular figure in Norse mythology for 1,000 years. But even Thor has limits, and the story that reveals them most beautifully is his journey to the fortress of Utgard Loki, a tale about humility, about the gap between what we see and what is real, and about the strange comfort of discovering that you are not as powerful as you thought. Thor set out one day with Loki at his side, the trickster god, his frequent companion, whose company was equal parts useful and dangerous. They traveled eastward into Jotunheim, the land of the giants, looking for adventure. Along the way they gathered a young human servant named Chelthi, who was the fastest runner in Midgard. After a strange night spent sleeping inside what turned out to be a giant's glove,
The giant was so enormous that his glove was the size of a house. They arrived at a fortress called Utgard-Loki. Its walls rose so high that Thor had to crane his neck back until his hat fell off just to see the top. Inside, the giant king Utgard-Loki welcomed them with a challenge. "Everyone here must prove they are the best at something," he said. "What skills do you bring?" Loki stepped forward first. "No one can eat faster than I can," he declared. A trough of meat was set before him and a giant named Logi at the other end. They raced. Loki devoured the meat with incredible speed, but when they met in the middle, Logi had eaten the meat, the bones, and the trough itself. Loki had lost. Thjalfi challenged the fastest runner in Utgard. 3 races, 3 losses. It was not even close. Then it was Thor's turn. "I can outdrink anyone," Thor declared, and Utgard-Loki brought him a drinking horn. "Most of my guests drain this in one pull," the giant said. "The weakest manage it in 3. Thor drank. He drank with all his might. The mead barely dropped. He drank again and again, barely lowering the level at all. 3 mighty pulls, and the horn was still nearly full. Thor was furious. Utgard-Loki offered another challenge. Lift a cat off the ground. Simple enough. Thor wrapped his arms around the huge gray cat and heaved, and could only manage to lift 1 paw from the floor. One final challenge. Wrestle an old woman named Ellie. Thor agreed. How hard could it be? The old woman shuffled forward, and within moments Thor was on one knee, the greatest of the gods, brought to his knee by an elderly woman. Thor and his companions left the fortress in shame, but outside the walls Utgard-Loki caught up with them and told the truth. "You were never going to win," he said, "but not for the reasons you think. Logi, the eating champion, was not a giant at all. He was fire itself. No one can consume faster than flame. The runner who beat Thjalfi was thought. No one outruns the speed of thought. The drinking horn was connected to the ocean. He had been drinking the sea, and he had lowered it enough to create the tides. The cat was the Midgard serpent, coiled around the entire world, and Thor had lifted part of it from the ocean floor. And the old woman, she was old age. No one defeats old age, not even Thor. Utgard-Loki vanished. The fortress vanished. It had all been an illusion, a test designed to humble the gods. But the truth was the opposite of humiliation. Thor had not won, but he had nearly drunk the ocean. He had lifted a world serpent. He had wrestled time itself to a standstill. Rest now with that thought. that sometimes defeat contains a hidden victory, that the measure of what you are is not whether you succeed at impossible tasks, but how far you reach when you try. Of all the stories in Norse mythology, the death of Balder is the one that breaks your heart. Balder was the most beautiful of the gods, not beautiful in the way of vanity, but in the way of morning light falling through mist. He was gentle, he was kind, he was beloved by every living thing. When Balder walked through Asgard, flowers turned to him the way they turn toward the sun. Even his dreams were bright, until they weren't. Balder began having nightmares, dark dreams, dreams of his own death. In the Norse world, dreams were not dismissed, they were messages. And when the most beloved god in existence dreams of dying, the entire cosmos takes notice. His mother, Frigg, queen of Asgard, goddess of wisdom and foresight, was terrified. She did something that only a mother's love could conceive. She traveled to every corner of the 9 worlds, and she asked everything, every creature, every plant, every stone, every metal, every disease, every element. She asked them all to swear an oath never to harm Balder. And they agreed, all of them. Fire swore not to burn him, water swore not to drown him, iron swore not to cut him. Every beast, every poison, every plague, they all loved Balder, and they all promised. Almost all. Frigg passed over one small thing, a sprig of mistletoe growing in an oak tree west of Valhalla. It was so young, so small, so harmless. What could mistletoe possibly do? The gods, believing Baldur was now invulnerable, made a game of it. They stood in a circle and threw things at him. Stones bounced off, spears clattered away, axes turned aside. Baldur stood in the middle, laughing, radiant, untouchable. The gods roared with delight. It was the happiest scene in all Norse mythology. And Loki watched. Loki, the trickster, the shapeshifter, the god who was half Aesir and half giant, who belonged fully to neither world. Loki was clever and cruel and funny and destructive, often in the same breath. He had helped the gods many times. He had endangered them just as often. And now, something in Baldur's invulnerability bothered him. Not because he hated Baldur, everyone loved Baldur, but because perfection offended Loki's nature. Because a world where nothing could go wrong was a world without stories. Loki disguised himself as an old woman and visited Frigg. In gentle conversation, he drew out the truth. "Is everything sworn the oath?" he asked. "Everything?" And Frigg, trusting this harmless crone, mentioned the mistletoe. So small, So young, she had not bothered to ask. Loki found the mistletoe. He fashioned it into a dart, and then he approached Baldur's blind brother Hodor, who stood at the edge of the circle, unable to join the game because he could not see. "Would you like to honor your brother too?" Loki asked, his voice warm and kind. "I will guide your hand." Hodor smiled. He threw the dart. Loki guided it. The mistletoe struck Baldur in the chest, and the light went out. Baldur fell. A laughter stopped. A silence filled Asgard that the Eddas describe as deeper than any silence before or since. The most beloved being in the universe lay dead on the ground, killed by the one thing his mother thought was too small to matter. Frigg's grief was beyond description, but she did not surrender to it. She asked who among the gods would ride to Hel, the realm of the dead, and bargain for Baldur's return. Hermod the brave volunteered. He mounted Odin's 8-legged horse Sleipnir and rode for 9 days down the dark road to Hel's gates. Hel, the goddess of the dead, heard his plea. She was not cruel. She made an offer. If every living thing in the 9 worlds would weep for Baldur, she would release him. The gods sent messengers everywhere, and everything wept. Humans wept, animals wept, stones wept, trees wept. The entire world cried for the god of light. Everything, except one old giantess sitting alone in a cave. "Let Hel keep what Hel has," she said. "I weep no tears for Baldur." Many believe that giantess was Loki in disguise. We will never know for certain. But because of one refusal, Baldur stayed in the realm of the dead. The light did not come back. This story has the shape of something true, something you can feel even tonight in the quiet. That the things we lose are sometimes lost because of the smallest oversights. That love, no matter how fierce, cannot protect everything. That grief is the shadow cast by everything we hold dear. But the story does not end in the dark. Remember Ragnarok. Remember what comes after. After the final battle, after the old world falls, Baldur returns. He walks out of Hel's realm into a green and sunlit world, and the light that went out comes back. Some losses are not forever. Some dark passages are just passages. Rest with that thought tonight, and let us move on to something gentler. Not all of Odin's quests involved hanging from trees or plucking out eyes.
Some were stranger, wilder, and, in their way, funnier. The story of the Mead of Poetry begins with a peace treaty. Long ago, the two families of gods, the Aesir and the Vanir, fought a war. When they finally made peace, they sealed the agreement in an unusual way. Every god from both sides spat into a great vat. From their mingled saliva, a being was created, Kvasir. Kvasir was the wisest person who ever existed. He traveled the worlds, answering every question anyone asked, and his answers were always exactly right. He was pure wisdom made flesh, made from the cooperation of gods who had once been enemies. Two dwarves killed him. Fjalar and Galar invited Kvasir to their home and murdered him, draining his blood into 2 vats and a kettle. They mixed the blood with honey, and the result was the Mead of Poetry. Anyone who drank it would become a poet, a singer of truths, a speaker of words so beautiful they could change the shape of reality. The dwarves eventually lost the mead to a giant named Suttung, who hid it deep inside a mountain called Hnitbjörg. He set his daughter Gunnlod to guard it, alone in a stone chamber in the dark heart of the mountain. And Odin wanted it. Of course he wanted it. The mead was liquid wisdom, liquid beauty, liquid truth. It was everything Odin had been seeking his entire existence, distilled into 3 containers of enchanted honey wine. He devised a plan that was equal parts cunning and audacity. First, he approached Suttung's brother, Baugi, disguised as a wandering laborer named Bulwark. He offered to do the work of 9 men in exchange for a single sip of the mead. Baugi agreed, though the sip was not really his to give. Odin worked all summer. When harvest came, Baugi took him to the mountain and tried to help him drill through the rock to where the mead was hidden. But Baugi's drill barely scratched the surface. So Odin transformed himself into a serpent, a snake so slender he could slide through the narrowest crack, and he slithered through the stone into the heart of the mountain. Inside he found Gunnlod, alone, guarding the mead in darkness, as she had for who knows how long. And here the story takes a turn that is both tender and troubling. Odin stayed with Gunnlod for 3 nights. He was charming, he was present, and she who had been alone in the dark for so long gave him what he asked for, 3 sips of the mead, 1 from each container. But Odin's sips were not small. In 3 drinks he drained all 3 vessels completely. His cheeks bulged with the sacred mead. He shifted his shape one more time into an eagle, and he burst from the mountain, wings beating furiously toward Asgard.
Suttung saw him. Suttung also became an eagle. The chase across the sky was one of the great spectacles of the mythological world. Two eagles, one carrying the treasure of the cosmos in his beak, racing toward the walls of Asgard. The gods saw Odin coming and set out vats in the courtyard. Odin just barely cleared the wall and spat the mead into the vats. In his haste, some drops fell behind him, outside the wall, and these drops, say the Norse poets, are the source of all bad poetry. Every terrible verse ever written comes from those spilled drops. But the true mead, the mead that Odin saved, became the gift of poetic inspiration, the ability to see the world clearly and speak about it beautifully, the gift of finding the right words, the true words, the words that can make a stranger weep or a sleeping person dream of distant golden halls. There is a bitter-sweet thread running through this story. Gunnlod is left behind in the dark mountain. She gave the mead freely, or as freely as anyone gives anything to a charming stranger who arrives in the night and leaves before dawn. The Norse poets do not dwell on her feelings, but they are there if you look. The mead of poetry comes at a cost, and the cost is not always paid by the one who receives the gift. Let this story settle now, like words finding their place in a poem. The fire in the mead hall has burned lower still. Outside, the wind carries the sound of distant waves, and the mead of poetry flows through these words tonight, the same gift passed down through 1,000 years of telling. Every family has a member who creates chaos. In the Norse cosmos, that member is Loki. Loki is the most complicated figure in all of mythology. He is not evil in the way a villain is evil. He is unpredictable in the way a fire is unpredictable. Useful, even necessary, but capable at any moment of burning the house down. He helped the gods build their greatest treasures. Mjolnir, Thor's hammer. Loki is the reason it exists, having tricked the dwarves into forging it. The golden hair of Sif, the ship Skidbladnir, Odin's ring Draupnir. Loki set the challenges that produced these wonders. Without his mischief, the gods would have had far fewer gifts. But he also killed Balder. He engineered the murder of the most beloved being in existence, and for that there was no forgiveness. After Balder's death, after the old giantess refused to weep, after Balder remained in the realm of the dead, the gods turned on Loki. He knew they would. He fled. He hid in a house on a mountain top with 4 doors, one facing each direction, so he could see anyone coming. By day, he disguised himself as a salmon hiding in a waterfall. By night, he sat by his fire, weaving a net, the first fishing net ever made, and trying to think of ways to escape what was coming. It was the net that betrayed him. When the gods arrived, they found the ash impression of the net in his fire. He had thrown it in the fire before fleeing to the waterfall. They understood immediately what it was. They wove a copy, and they used it to catch him. Thor grabbed the salmon Loki as he leapt over the net, seized him by the tail, which is why the Norse say salmon tails are tapered and thin to this day. They dragged him to a cave. They brought his 2 sons, Narfi and Vali, and then, in one of the most terrible moments in the mythology, the gods transformed Vali into a wolf, and the wolf tore his brother apart. They took Narfi's entrails, and they used them to bind Loki to 3 flat stones. Above his face they hung a serpent. The serpent dripped venom, drop after drop, onto Loki's upturned face, burning, agonizing venom. His wife Sigyn stayed with him, faithful Sigyn, who held a bowl above his face to catch the venom, sparing him the pain. But the bowl fills, and when she turns to empty it, the venom falls on Loki's face, and he writhes in agony, so violent that the earth itself shakes. That, say the Norse, is the cause of earthquakes. This is a hard story. It is not a gentle bedtime tale, but it carries a truth that the Norse understood deeply, that actions have consequences, and some consequences cannot be escaped or charmed away. Loki's cleverness could not save him. His shape-shifting could not save him. Even his silver tongue, which had talked him out of every disaster he had ever caused, could find no words to undo the death of Baldur. The gods who had laughed at his pranks and tolerated his chaos for ages could not laugh at this. Some lines once crossed cannot be uncrossed. The only thing that remained in the end was love, Sigyn's love, holding the bowl, enduring an eternity of vigil in a dark cave because she would not abandon the person she had chosen. There is something in Sigyn's devotion that transcends the horror of the story. She does not question. She does not bargain. She simply stays. She catches the poison. She empties the bowl. She comes back. Over and over, through ages of darkness, she comes back. The fire in the hall is very low now, just a bed of embers, red gold and breathing slowly. The wind outside has gentled, and perhaps the harshest stories, the ones with the most pain, are the ones that also hold the most tenderness. Loki will lie bound beneath the earth until Ragnarok. When the final battle comes, his bonds will break, and he will rise, broken and furious, to lead the forces of destruction against the gods. But that is not tonight. Tonight Sigyn holds the bowl. Tonight the earth is still. Tonight the venom does not fall. Rest now, and let the next story be lighter. Let us hear about the creation of something beautiful. After the gods had built the world from Ymir's body, after they had set the stars in place and raised the sky and circled Midgard with its protective wall, the earth was beautiful, but it was empty. Green fields stretched to the horizon, rivers wound through valleys, trees stood in forests so deep they seemed to go on forever. Waves rolled onto beaches of smooth stone. Everything was in place, except the people who would walk upon it and look up at the sky and wonder what it all meant. Odin and his brothers, Vili and Ve, were walking along the shore one day. The tide had gone out, leaving behind the debris of the sea, shells and seaweed and tangled kelp, and, half buried in the sand, 2 pieces of driftwood. The gods stopped. They looked at the wood, and something stirred in them, the same impulse that had led them to build a world from a giant's body, the impulse to create. Odin knelt beside the driftwood and breathed upon it. He gave the wood Ond, the breath of life, the spark of consciousness that separates a living being from a log on a beach. Vili gave them wits and feeling, the ability to think, to feel joy and sorrow, to love and grieve and wonder. He gave them the inner life that makes existence more than mere survival. They gave them form and senses, faces that could express what they felt, eyes that could see the world their father gods had built, ears that could hear the wind and the waves, and one day stories about where they came from. The first driftwood became a man. They named him Ask, which means ash tree. The second became a woman. They named her Embla, which may mean elm or vine, though the meaning is debated. What is not debated is that they were the first humans, and from them all of us descend. There is something in this creation story that feels different from others you may know. Humans were not molded from clay or spoken into existence by an omnipotent word. They were found on a beach among the ordinary wreckage of the tide, and seen for what they could become. The gods did not create humans from nothing. They created them from something that already existed, wood that had been shaped by the sea, tossed by waves, weathered by salt and sun. The material of human life in the Norse telling is not precious metal or divine substance. It is driftwood, common, weather-beaten, imperfect. And the gods looked at that imperfect material and said,
This will do. This will be magnificent. Odin's gift, breath, spirit, consciousness is the foundation. Without ond, we are wood. With it, we are alive. But it is Vili's gift that gives life its texture, the ability to feel. To sit by a fire on a winter's night and feel warmth. To hold someone's hand and feel connected. To look up at the northern lights and feel awe. To lie in the dark and feel the gentle weight of sleep approaching.
And V's gift, form and senses, is what allows us to experience the world, to hear waves on a shore, the way Ask and Embla must have heard them in their first moments of life, to see color and shadow and the play of light on water, to feel wind on skin, to taste salt, to smell pine resin and hearth smoke and cold mountain air. These gifts were given freely. No price was asked, no covenant demanded, no rules, no commandments, no conditions. The gods simply gave, because creation is what gods do, because the world they had built deserved beings who could appreciate it. Ask and Embla stood on the beach and looked at the world. What they saw was the same world you see when you look up at the sky on a clear night. The same stars scattered by Odin across Ymir's skull. The same wind that blew across the first empty fields blows outside your window tonight. The Norse poets believe that we carry something of the gods inside us, literally, Odin's breath, the spark of consciousness that allows you, right now, in this moment, to be aware, to notice the weight of your body, the rhythm of your breathing, the gentle drift toward sleep. You are driftwood that was given the breath of the divine, and tonight that breath is slow and warm and steady. Between the stories, between the great tales of gods and giants and the end of the world, the Norse left behind something quieter, something more personal. The Havamal, the words of the High One, is a collection of wisdom verses attributed to Odin himself. Not Odin the warrior, or the wizard, or the king of gods, but Odin the wanderer. Odin walking alone through the world in a broad-brimmed hat, one eye dark, the other seeing everything, gathering the kind of knowledge that does not come from wells or trees, but from simply living. The Havamal is practical. It is earthy. It is sometimes funny. It is advice given by someone who has made every mistake and wants to spare you a few of them. If the stories of the gods are the architecture of the Norse mind, the Havamal is the furniture, the things they actually lived with every day. A guest should be courteous when he comes to a meal, and silent and attentive.
His ears should listen, his eyes should look. That is how the wise man finds his way. This verse opens the poem, and it is perfect for tonight. Be a guest. Be courteous. Be silent and attentive. Listen. Watch. That is all you need to do. The foolish man lies awake all night, thinking about everything. He is weary when morning comes, and his troubles are just as they were.
The Norse knew about sleepless nights. They knew about the mind that will not stop turning. And Odin's advice is simple. Let it go. The worries will be there in the morning regardless. The only thing lost by resting is the exhaustion. A man should not hold on to too much, for the more he owns, the more he fears. This is advice for a 1,000-year-old Viking, and for anyone lying awake tonight wondering about money or possessions or the things they have accumulated. Let it go. It will keep. Where you know of evil, speak against it, and give your enemies no peace. Not all the Havamal is gentle. The Norse were not soft people. They lived in a hard world, cold, dark, dangerous, and they valued strength as well as wisdom. But even their fierceness had a moral center. Speak against evil. Do not let cruelty pass unchallenged. This is not a comfortable advice, but it is honest. A friend should be a friend to his friend and to his friend's friend, but no man should be a friend to his friend's enemy. Loyalty mattered. In a world where survival depended on the people around you, where a winter storm or a raid or a failed harvest could end everything, loyalty was not sentiment, it was survival. You took care of the people who took care of you. This was the foundation of Norse society, the invisible web of obligations and affections that held communities together through the long northern winters. Better a living dog than a dead lion.
Wait, no, that is from a different tradition. But the Havamal has its own version of this practical wisdom. The lame can ride a horse, the handless can herd, the deaf can fight and win. Better to be blind than to be burned on a pyre. A dead man is of no use to anyone. Survive, adapt, work with what you have. Do not sit and mourn what is lost. Use what remains. This is not gentle advice. It is the advice of people who knew that despair was a luxury they could not afford. But the verse that echoes loudest across the centuries, the one that contains the entire Norse philosophy in 4 lines, is this. Cattle die, kinsmen die, you yourself will die. But there is one thing I know that never dies, the reputation of the dead. Everything ends.
The Norse did not pretend otherwise. They did not offer an afterlife of eternal comfort. Even Valhalla was a preparation for final battle, not a paradise. What they offered instead was this: the chance to live in such a way that your story is still worth telling after you are gone. Not fame, not glory, reputation, the way the people who knew you remember you, the way your actions ripple outward through the web of weird, touching lives you never met, the thread you wove into the tapestry. This is what Odin learned hanging from the tree. This is what the Norns weave into fate. This is what every story tonight has been about, in one way or another. The things that remain when everything else has passed. Let the Havamal's final gift for tonight be its simplest. A kind word need not cost much. The price of praise is never too high. Be kind. It costs nothing. It echoes forever. And now, let the old poet's voice fade as the embers settle lower, and we turn toward the ending. The end was always coming. The Norse gods knew this. From the moment Odin drank from Mimir's well and gained the sight that sees beyond the present, he knew the world would end. The gods would fall. All that they had built, Asgard, Valhalla, Bifrost, the great hall where the Einherjar feasted, all of it would be destroyed in a final cataclysmic battle. And they chose to face it anyway. This is perhaps the most remarkable thing about Norse mythology. The gods are not omnipotent. They are not eternal. They are powerful and ancient and wise, but they are mortal. They have an expiration date. And knowing this, seeing it clearly, they do not surrender to despair. They prepare. They gather the fallen warriors in Valhalla. They sharpen their weapons. They stand on the walls of Asgard and look toward the horizon, and they wait. Ragnarok begins with signs. First comes the Fimbul winter, 3 winters in a row with no summer between them. The world grows cold, crops fail, rivers freeze solid. People turn against each other, brothers fighting brothers, bonds of kinship breaking, all oaths forgotten. The social fabric tears apart, and the wolves that have been chasing the sun and moon across the sky since the beginning finally catch them. The sun goes dark. The stars vanish. The world is plunged into a blackness deeper than anything since Ginnungagap. Then Heimdall blows his horn, Gjallarhorn, the horn that can be heard in all 9 worlds. Its sound is the alarm, the announcement. The end has begun. Loki breaks free from his bonds. The Midgard serpent rises from the ocean, its coils covering the earth,
venom pouring from its jaws. The great wolf Fenrir, another of Loki's children, bound by the gods long ago, snaps his chains and opens his mouth so wide that his lower jaw touches the earth and his upper jaw touches the sky. The dead rise from hell's realm and sail toward the final battlefield on a ship made of dead men's fingernails. The fire giant Surt advances from Muspelheim, his flaming sword blazing so brightly that it outshines the missing sun, and the gods march out to meet them. Odin faces Fenrir, the All-Father, the one-eyed seeker of wisdom, the god who hung from a tree and drank from the well and traded everything he had for understanding. He walks toward the great wolf knowing he will die, and Fenrir swallows him whole. But Odin's son Vidar, the silent god, who has spoken barely a word in all the ages of the world, steps forward. He places his iron-shod foot on Fenrir's lower jaw and tears the wolf apart. His father's death does not go unanswered. Thor faces the Midgard serpent, his ancient enemy. They have circled each other across all of time, Thor on his fishing trip, nearly pulling the serpent from the sea. The serpent coiled around the world, waiting for this moment. Thor lifts Mjolnir one last time and strikes the serpent dead. And then Thor takes 9 steps backwards and falls. The serpent's venom has done its work. The protector of both gods and humans lies still upon the battlefield. Loki and Heimdall face each other, and they fall together. Mutual destruction. The trickster and the watchman, bound in a final embrace. Surt throws his fire across the world. Everything burns. Yggdrasil, the great tree that held everything together, shudders and groans and begins to fall. The 9 worlds come apart. The earth sinks into the sea. This is the end. But it is not. The Voluspa, the greatest of the Norse prophetic poems, does not stop with the destruction. It continues, and what it describes next is one of the most beautiful passages in all world literature. The earth rises again from the sea, green, renewed. Waterfalls cascade down mountains that have never been climbed. Eagles fly in clear skies. Fields produce crops without being sown. And Balder returns, the god of light, the beloved one who was killed by mistletoe and held in hell's realm while the world wept, walks out of death into a world that has been made new. He and his blind brother Hoder, reunited, forgiven, standing in sunlight. The surviving gods, a small number, Younger gods who endured the fire find Odin's golden chess pieces in the grass. The game can begin again. This is the Norse answer to the darkness. Not denial, not false hope. The darkness is real. The destruction is total. Everything you love will be lost. But after the loss, after the fire, after the longest winter, something green pushes up through the ashes. Something returns. Rest with this tonight, the oldest comfort humanity has ever found, that endings contain beginnings, that winter always yields to spring, that even the death of the gods is not the end of the story. The fire in the mead hall is nearly out now. Just a few embers, glowing soft and red, breathing in the darkness like a sleeping animal. The shadows have grown long and warm, and the great timber beams above are lost in the dark, holding the roof the way Yggdrasil holds the sky. Outside, the snow has stopped. The fjord lies still and silver under a sky that has cleared just enough to show the stars. The same stars that the gods scattered across Ymir's skull in the first days of creation, still burning, still scattered, still beautiful. You have heard a great deal tonight, perhaps too much to hold all at once, and that is exactly right. You were never meant to hold it all. The stories are not lessons to be memorized. They are currents to be carried by, rivers that know where they are going, even if you do not. The Norse people understood this. They did not write their stories down, not for centuries. They trusted the spoken word, the voice in the firelight, the way a tale changes slightly with each telling, the way it settles into the listener differently depending on who they are and where they are in their life. A story heard on a winter night when you are young sounds different from the same story heard when you are old. Both hearings are true. Tonight's hearing is yours. Whatever stayed with you is what was meant to stay. The image of Ginnungagap, that vast emptiness where fire met ice. The patience of Audumla licking a god from a block of frost. Odin hanging from his tree, reaching for the runes. Thor drinking the ocean without knowing it. Boulder falling. Sigyn holding the bowl. 2 pieces of driftwood becoming the first humans. Or maybe none of those. Maybe what stays is something simpler. The sound of wind in pines, the warmth of embers, the knowledge that somewhere beneath a tree older than time, 3 women are tending the roots and weaving the threads of everything that is. The Havamal promised that cattle die and kinsmen die, and we ourselves will die, but that what we do echoes. and these stories have echoed for 1,000 years. The people who first told them, the Norse poets sitting in halls just like this one, speaking to listeners just like you, they are long gone, but their voices remain, carried by the words, carried by the telling. You are part of that chain now. These stories have passed through you tonight, as they have passed through countless others across the centuries. Tomorrow you will remember some of them. In a week, perhaps only fragments. In a year, maybe just a feeling. The feeling of a fire burning low in a hall made of ancient wood, and a voice that asked nothing of you except that you listen. That is enough. That has always been enough. The Norse world is not a gentle place. It is cold and fierce and full of loss. But it is also a place where courage matters, where kindness is never wasted, where even the gods are willing to face impossible odds because the alternative, giving up, is the only true defeat. And it is a place where the fire always comes back. The world sinks into the sea and rises again. The gods fall, and new gods find their golden pieces in the grass. The stories are forgotten, and someone, somewhere, remembers them. The great sagas speak of a concept the Norse called sjálfsvald, self-rule, the quiet mastery of one's own spirit. Not dominance over others, but the ability to remain steady when the world shifts beneath your feet. Odin practiced it on his tree. Thor practiced it in Utgard, accepting defeat with dignity. Sigyn practices it still in her dark cave, choosing love over bitterness with every bowl she empties. You practice it tonight, simply by being here, by letting the day go, by choosing rest over worry, by trusting that the morning will come, and the threads will hold, and the tree, however ancient, will stand for one more night. Let the fire breathe its last few breaths now. Let the embers dim. You have been a good guest tonight, patient and present and still. The old storyteller would have liked you. The wind outside has gentled to almost nothing. The fjord reflects the stars like a dark mirror. And somewhere, if you listen very carefully, you can almost hear the roots of Yggdrasil creaking gently in earth that is older than memory. And now the hall is quiet. The fire has gone to ash. The storyteller has finished. The only sound is your own breathing, slow and steady, and the faintest whisper of wind through pine trees that have stood for 1,000 years. The Norse world sleeps tonight. Odin sits on his throne in the dark, his ravens on his shoulders,
one eye closed and the other seeing everything, but choosing just now to rest. Thor has set Mjolnir on the floor beside his bed. Frigg has drawn her shawl around her shoulders and closed her eyes. Even Loki, bound beneath the earth, is still, and Sigin's bowl is full and steady, and no venom falls. The Norns continue their work. They always continue. The shuttle moves back and forth. The treads cross and recross. The pattern grows. Your thread is in there somewhere, woven gently into the fabric of everything else. Tonight it is a quiet thread, a resting thread, a thread that needs nothing added to it except peace. Yggdrasil stands. The great tree does not sleep. Trees never do. But it rests in its own way. The eagle at its crown has tucked its head beneath its wing. Ratatoska, the squirrel, has curled up in a hollow between the bark. The stags have settled among the branches. Even Nidhogg, gnawing at the roots below, has paused. The 9 worlds are held. Asgard shimmers faintly above the rainbow bridge. Midgard lies green and quiet under the stars. The frozen reaches of Niflheim are still. The fires of Muspelheim have bent to a low glow, like the embers that kept you warm through these stories. Everything is in its place. The ancient Norse had a word, friður. It means peace, but not the absence of conflict. It means the peace of a community gathered safely inside walls while the storm howls outside. The peace of obligations met, of guests welcomed, of stories told and received. The peace that exists between people who trust each other enough to close their eyes in the same hall. That is the peace of this moment. The stories have been told. The fire has served its purpose. The cold is outside, and you are inside, and the walls hold. Tomorrow, if you like, you can think about what you heard tonight. You can turn the stories over in your mind. Odin's sacrifice, Thor's humility, Baldur's light. You can look up at the sky and think of sparks scattered across a giant's skull. You can notice the trees around you and think of one tree that holds up everything. But that is for tomorrow. Tonight there is nothing left to carry, no runes to read, no wells to visit, no hammer to lift. The only thing left is rest, as deep and dark and quiet as the space between the stars. The wind has stopped entirely now. The fjord is glass, and somewhere in the deep root darkness beneath Yggdrasil, the waters of the well of Urd are perfectly still, reflecting a sky that will be there when you open your eyes again. The Voluspa, in its final stanzas, describes the dragon Nidhogg flying one last time over the renewed world, and then sinking down. Even the forces of destruction find their rest. Even the things that gnaw and bite and consume eventually grow still. There is a time for every thread to pause, and this is yours. If sleep has not yet found you, do not chase it. Sleep is not something to be caught. It is something that arrives, like the tide on a northern shore, like the first warmth of a fire catching kindling, like the slow uncovering of a god from a block of ice. It comes in its own time, and your only task is to be here, still, ready, the way the driftwood was ready on the beach before the gods arrived to breathe life into it. Sleep now as the Norse world sleeps, held by the same tree, under the same stars, in the same great darkness that was there before everything began, and will be there, patient and vast and gentle, when everything begins again. The fire is out. The hall is warm. Rest.